Hello and good evening. Welcome, one and all. This is episode 6 of Author Interaction. I'm Ananya Sitaraman, an intern at Rustle Book Club and an undergraduate student at Christ University. Rustle Book Club is the brainchild of Rahul Suri, an 18-year-old student at Shivnadar School. His initiative has allowed for the integration of people from various walks of life who have one thing in common: their passion for reading. Books reach the mind and the heart. It allows for empathy and sensitivity. It allows for connection. In today's uncertainty, narrating and listening to stories allows for us to build resilience and remember that we are not alone in the challenges that we face. I'd now like to introduce today's guest, Mr. Akshay Shroff. Mr. Akshay Shroff has been a successful advertising sales consultant for domestic and international media organizations spanning almost 4 decades, first in New Delhi and then in Mumbai. He has been associated with voluntary organizations like the Lions Club and the Junior Chamber International in senior positions, and also with trade bodies like the Delhi Advertising Club and the Press Club of India. His debut novel, The Monk, was first published in June 2016. It had sold several thousand copies within a month of its release and quickly became a national bestseller. It is currently being published in the Croatian language for distribution in Croatia. After the phenomenal success of the same, he has converted his passion for writing into a full-time engagement, resulting in the second novel, which is a sequel to the first, titled The Monk Returns. Good evening and welcome, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today.
Welcome. It's my pleasure.
So I'd like to start off with the questions, if you're ready. So first, can you please tell us a little bit more about the sequel?
About the sequel. Ananya, you want to know about the sequel?
Yeah, could you tell us more about the sequel, please?
Can I go back to the first novel and then come back to the sequel?
Of course. Yes, of course.
You see, I started writing sometime, I think about 15 years ago. And the first manuscript was on love and romance. But that then didn't have any takers. It had done the rounds of several literary agents around the world. But everybody rejected it, let's say, because it just wasn't up to the mark. Somebody suggested it to overhaul the same, which I did, made 2-3 attempts, but still there were no takers. Finally, we had this 26/11 attack in Mumbai in 2008.
Right.
And I had been seized all the while that what should be the topic of my book? So what should be the plot? What should I be writing? Because love and romance obviously have failed. No pun intended. So after this attack, a week after that, suddenly one morning I thought, why not write about terrorism? Because that was quite a topical subject. So I went back, I kept thinking on those lines and started writing. And within 5 months, I completed the first book, The Monk, which actually dealt with terrorist attacks in India and originated from Pakistan. Since 1993, March 1993, Mumbai bomb blast, until 2008. That book, of course, had been sold like hotcakes within a month of its launch. The second edition was out soon after. Then I kept thinking, I changed the subject. I thought I should write on something else now. And I did write about 10,000 words of that book. Then I said, no, I must go back to The Monk. And then meanwhile, we kept learning about terrorist attacks around the world, all over the world, and originating from Syria, IS. So I thought, why not now do something about terrorism, the menace that has spread across the globe. And hence, the monk had to be called back from wherever he had gone after the first adventure.
Right.
And it resulted in The Monk Returns, the sequel.
That's great, sir. So my next question to you is, do you have a mentor or do you have someone that you go to when you're looking for writing advice?
No, not at all. Not at all.
So it's just your research and inspiration.
Sorry?
It's your own research that gives you the inspiration to write. That's where you...
Right.
Right.
That's right.
Okay. So if I had to ask you, what is one of the most interesting or surprising things that you learned while you were doing your research or while you were writing these books? What would it be?
The amount of knowledge that prevails outside our own mind, frankly. I mean, the kind of research I had to do in both the books. There's so much that we just don't know. You know, in fact, for this sequel, I read about Islam, about the Quran, which and I'm a Hindu, so I was never exposed to this religion. But I did research, and I learned so much from it. Even for the first book, similarly, there's so much about the terror attacks and what are the terror modules operating and how they operate and why Pakistan has been a failed state and all those things. You know, I never knew. All that we know is what the newspapers we read in the morning period or what we have learned in the school or college. That's it. So that I think is the best best advantage of writing, that you get to learn irrespective of what others readers get to know. But as a writer, I myself learned so much from it, from the exercise.
Yeah, that's great, sir. So my next question is, did you always perceive yourself to be a writer or did you have other passions or interests when you were younger?
No, since let me now tell you, you see, my grandfather, he was partially paralyzed. His right hand was partially paralyzed. And in 1959, when I was perhaps 6 years old, I was 6 years old then, or 7 years in 1960. And he used to contribute articles in English and Marathi newspapers. He had translated a freedom struggle book way back in the 40s. He used to dictate and I would write because he couldn't use his hand. And that actually gave me confidence in my ability to express my thoughts at that early age, for that matter. And I have always had that passion. And then I read voraciously all sorts of books, non-fiction, fiction, since the age of 10, 11, 12, whatever. Since that early age, I have been reading. I always dreamt that I would like to be an author. But then business commitment, social and family compulsions prevented me from following this passion. But finally, at some point of time, I decided, no, let's start. And that also is a story because that time my wife had met with an accident, a freak accident in our building elevator. And I had developed some health problems. My business had been in doldrums and my finances had nosedived. But then we keep living, irrespective of the odds and obstacles we face. One evening when I returned home, as usual, I would have my cup of coffee at my shower, and then I sat down to write my daily accounts in the diary. And then unknown to me, my wife fixed a large drink of Old Monk rum for me, added the exact quantity of ice and water as I desired, and placed it in front of me with a bowl of peanuts and also a sheaf of blank papers. And then she said, enjoy your drink, but also start writing because you can. And that journey began since then.
That is a very heartwarming story, sir. It's very nice to know that despite all the odds, you have pursued your passion. So my next question would be, have you ever engaged in any literary pilgrimages, traveled to understand more about reading and literature, or things like that?
No, come again. I didn't follow.
Have you ever indulged in any literary pilgrimages, traveled for a better understanding of reading, writing, and literature, etc.?
No, none.
Right. Okay. So my next question would be, do you find that writing energizes you or exhausts you? As in, at the end of your writing process, do you feel like you need to go take a break, take a nap, or do you feel more energized because you're doing what you love?
Actually, I feel more energized. And
Okay.
and because of time constraints, well, you have to call it a day. But then you always feel, when I start writing again, there have been instances when I would wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning and start writing. Otherwise, in normal course, I would wake up at my usual time, 7 or 8.
Right.
It's energizing, not exhausting.
Okay, that's great. So have you ever considered writing under a pseudonym?
No, I don't. So far.
Okay. And what is your most favorite underappreciated novel or author? Who do you believe is an author, or which novel do you think is deserving of more recognition than it gets?
There have been quite a few, Ananya, but I must say Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead, and At Last Shrugged.
Right.
These books have created a great impact on me. And
Okay.
The Fountainhead I read 38 years ago, the first time. And then I've read it umpteen times for that matter. And then there have been quite a few other authors, Frederick Forsyth and Arthur Haley, Irving Wallace, Alistair MacLean. In those years, I have read all those, Harold Robbins. So yeah, quite a few authors I have been impressed by.
That's quite a list for our viewers to go and dive into. Thank you. My last question to you is, if you had to have a mascot or an avatar or a spirit animal as a writer, what would you pick?
No, again, you will have to come back.
If you had to pick a mascot or an avatar, or if you had to pick a spirit animal for yourself as a writer, what would you pick?
A dog.
A dog. Would you mind telling us why?
Sorry?
Would you mind telling us why a dog? Why do you think that's your spirit animal as a writer?
Since birth, I have been associated with dogs. I always loved them. They love me, rather. They love me. And in fact, in early 2004, we adopted a dog here. Maybe I'm living in Mumbai. And he was with us for 11 years. But he died in November 2014. But that was, if you know the Mumbai houses, the flats, it's like matchboxes. So within the confines of these 2, 3, 4 rooms, you have a dog, you come quite close to that animal, to that being.
Right.
Otherwise, well, in my childhood, I had dogs in my farmhouse. So huge grounds and the farms, and they would run around everywhere. But this was more closely associated kind of a thing.
Right.
And I loved them. In fact, my first book, both the books are dedicated to my dog, Kanai. His name was Kanai.
Okay. That's very touching, sir. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. It was incredibly insightful. It's a very enjoyable conversation. Once again, I'd like to thank Rahul Suri for organizing this evening and connecting people through the Rustle of Book Club experience. Please make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel to see more such interviews. Thank you so much for joining us today.